As Ren walked to his meeting with several human ambassadors, he was brought down several different corridors, and as he did, he couldn't help but notice there's always carpet underneath him, usually a very bright, vibrant color, almost always red. On the walls are paintings of other humans. There's different pillars, different decorations, and Ren had to snicker in his own way. To anyone that didn't understand, it was almost as though a horse was snorting or puckering its lips, kind of a however, not a full whinny. This got a few of the security's attention and wondered what was wrong, but Ren just kept it to himself. He realized it doesn't matter where you go. Those that think they're a big deal are always going to decorate the holy crap out of wherever they live, wherever they work, just because they can. Doesn't matter how much it costs. And this same hubris is what cost his home planet. He almost thought it was hilarious, the fact that humanity seems to be copying him. But then he found out how old the building was. The building was even older than when they first met. The meeting had barely got on its way before a man actually burst into the room, screaming, "You gotta see this, you have to see this," turning on several monitors. Everyone in the room turned to face them, some having to swivel their chairs all the way around, but as they looked on, Ren felt his heart drop to his tail. It was an image of his home planet. The Paw Chu had returned, but this time they had come with much larger ships, much more devastating ships. They were not playing around, and they were currently engaging human forces. He looked and he could see that the few human forces that were there were fighting with everything they could, firing to the point where their weapon systems began to glow as excess heat was not able to be vented. They were firing their weapons at 100%, 120, 140, almost 200%. It breaches 212, and it doesn't matter what you do. There's a critical failure and something explodes. But it seems though the humans did not care at all. They realized that if they let the Paw Chu fleet through, all their work, everything they had done to save the civilians would be for absolutely nothing. So those Navy men did what they do best, and they went cyclic. They also began to charge the Paw Chu lines, getting right into their face to the point where even point defense systems began to rock and roll. The multi-barreled weapons began to rattle off thousands and thousands of tungsten rounds right into the hulls of the Paw Chu. The Paw Chu had set up for a slug match. They had very few tertiary or point defense weapons, but now they were realizing that was a bad idea. They should really have even more weapons. Even though they could bring many of their larger weapons to bear, they did not have as much turreted weapons as they needed to. As the human forces got close, very fast, their sublight engines getting them a whole lot closer, faster than anybody would have expected, the Paw Chu just laid into them as much as possible. It turned into a complete melee. Drones swarmed around, cutting into any ship they could, kamikazing when weapons failed. Torpedoes, missiles were fired out so fast that some ships actually were running out of ordnance. Main gun rounds were slicing through ships on both sides without any hesitation, knowing that this was an all-or-nothing fight. And as the explosions began to send debris fields all across the battlefield, both sides realized that this was a losing gambit. The debris field was too thick. They wouldn't be able to get around there. They needed something smaller, something more nimble, and that is when humanity showed its trump card. From the surface, civilians had brought up their corvettes, and each of these corvettes was armed to the teeth, multiple torpedoes and missile launchers, point defense cannons, and of course, at least one big fucking gun, usually sticking out the front. This Gauss rifle, this rail gun, this absolute death made of metal, got in close, was able to duck, dive, and dodge around the debris field and tear into the Paw Chu ships. The few ships that were still there finally said it's not worth it. Not to mention they're outgunned at point-blank range. They need to back away. Even though they outnumber humanity, they are still failing to actually secure the planet. They began to charge through recklessly, aiming straight towards the Toes' homeworld. They decided if they're going to take something down, it's going to be the Toes' planet. And that is exactly what they did. Humanity fought with everything, and Ren looked on in horror as the Pachu dreadnoughts that still functioned, both of them, made a kamikaze attempt towards the planet. As they did, pods started launching out, but these were not drones. These were life pods heading to the planet, and they were going to destroy everything, kill everything, shock everything, and rip it to pieces with their claws and their teeth like the angry little weasels that they are. The human forces tried everything they could, and when all else failed, one of the human battleships, the Silver Fang, kamikazed straight into one of the Pachu dreadnoughts, hitting it broadside, made the Pachu ship bend over, and if looked from one side or another, it looked like a giant arrow, pushing the ship away from the Toe's home planet. This cost the crew of the Silver Fang almost everything. The front compartment was almost completely crushed in. Regardless of how strong the armor is, everything has its tensile strength limit. With that, the Pachu's battleship not just bent, but also slammed into the sides, and then you could see half of the human battleship was almost completely destroyed. Atmosphere vented from all sides at this point, and bodies started to come out. It didn't matter if they had set to condition Z or not. When you break open the sealed compartment, it's still going to leak. Many died slow before they had a chance to even put on their emergency breathers. It was horrific. The final Pachu battleship, the final Pachu dreadnought even, drove towards the planet. Every human ship was now firing on it, trying to break it into at least smaller pieces, trying to get anything to happen, but the only thing they got was the engines to go critical. Just enough as it entered the mesosphere. It did not destroy the ship completely, and as the bow half tumbled towards the homeworld, Ren just could feel the pain, all the fear of his own people. He didn't even know where the ship was going to strike, but if it hit one of the population centers even close, all the people that they had saved would be taken out, and he couldn't possibly take it. He stared at the monitor, and everyone inside the chamber watched as the ship crashed onto the planet, striking one of the mountain ranges. With this, Ren realized that it was away from a population center. However, the resulting explosion blew the mountain to pieces. The resulting dust cloud might as well have been a supervolcano at that point, and everyone in the chamber watched. Only for a moment, though. They immediately began calling for any reinforcements, any assistance to help on the Toe's homeworld. They needed to get any type of medical they could there as fast as possible. Everyone in that room knew how dangerous a supervolcano actually is, and they needed to get as much respiratory equipment and as much construction material on the ground as soon as they could. Yet the fleet out in orbit wasn't going to be able to help much. Even the corvettes were running themselves dry on ammo. They couldn't keep going. The Pachu fleet had been massive. Massive in number, considering the Pachu have many, many more planets than humanity. This became a battle of attrition. And now humans are starting to lose. In the end, the human fleet did survive, but they were absolutely crippled. Every corvette that was up in space was desperately trying to save anyone they could, making sure they could get as many to survive. Humans at this point literally live forever, so losing even one pains them. But now in battle, they have lost thousands. By the time the number was counted, tens of thousands had been lost. And that's not even counting those on the ground. Those that were now covered in ash clouds that destroyed the entire environment for thousands of miles. Many of their fauna simply choked to death. Much of their flora was now extinct, completely covered in concrete, as the mountain itself had turned into powdered rock. It was horrific. However, with human help, they would survive. Yet this attack, even though it was successful for the Pachu, it also succeeded in doing one more thing. It pissed the humans off something fierce. Especially the video that came in after. Several of the Pachu ships could see that there were human civilian corvettes simply trying to save others, sending folks out in their own EVA suits, trying just to reach out to anybody, save them from the hostile non-atmosphere that is space. But the Pachu ships would simply turn up their engines, and if they had no weapons left, they would slam into the humans, stopping them from simply saving their own. The battle was over, but they were still taking shots, and this annoyed and just pissed off humanity. This is something that is not done. The battle was over. They even said this over the communications, but the Pachu sent their own version of "fuck you, asshole." With that, humanity saw what they had left, called for everybody to assist them on the next mission so that they could say, "No, fuck you, asshole." Within a week's time, over by the colony of Meth, humans had assembled everything they could. The majority of ships were now civilian ships, but these were almost all former military, all of them geared up, all of them armed, all of them ready to fight, and they were going to need these ships because the colony of Trippy, well, that was going to be rather difficult. Everyone knew that this was going to be a cornerstone. If they can take it, they knew that they would be able to stop any further advancements by the Pachu. As the fleet jumped into Trippy space, they tried to mask themselves by jumping in between the planet and its star. This caused many injuries, as the gravity pull from one side or the other was rather violent. Yet in doing so, they actually masked the signature of them jumping into the system. Though someone would know something jumped in, they would have absolutely no idea of how large of a fleet this was. This gave the element of surprise, and it gave humanity first strike abilities. As they charged forward, many of the destroyers, the cruisers, the battleships, and the several dreadnoughts that had come fresh off the line fired their largest weapons, those that could reach out and touch someone in ways that they're not going to enjoy, started to tear at the Pachu fleet around the Trippy colony. The Trippy colony itself tried to deploy as much as it could, but it's a supply depot, not a military facility. It was going to be reliant on its fleet, but now the fleet was catching fire before it even realized where the fire was coming from. As all the fleet of the Pachu tried to turn and amass to make sure they could face humanity, the fact that their sensors were being scrambled by solar radiation made it difficult to target, and this gave humanity another advantage. Though jumping in between planets and the star is excessively dangerous, ballsy, stupid but ballsy, but it still works. Rage Ren had actually been against this idea completely, as he knew how dangerous this was. He told everybody that it was completely idiotic. It was stupid. That's when one of the commanders turned and said, "Hey, if it's stupid but it works, it ain't stupid, now is it?" This made Rage Ren actually stop for a second and have to take a seat because he realized what he had just been told. Rage Ren's frigate, the Ajnu, was inside the humans' formation with several more of his newly commissioned ships, but it was nothing compared to what the humans brought. The humans brought all their big guns to take down the fleet of the Pachu, targeting the biggest guns first. They took down several battleships and at least one more dreadnought before anything else happened. Now, the Pachu were trying to get as close as they could, not just to make sure they could target the human ships, but also that they could use their weapons. Their weapons, except for the actual dreadnoughts and battleships, were quite short range as far as space combat goes. The Pachu drove straight towards the human lines, and that's when the humans surprised them. Not only were they firing, not only did they send out their missiles and torpedoes, not only did they send their drones, but it seemed as though every Corvette-class human ship had accelerated ahead. They started charging in. It seemed as though they were ready for a fight, and as they got close, the Pachu got ready, but they had to dodge the drones, the missiles, the torpedoes, and everything else, and they believed that they were going to be in a furball with the human corvettes. And judging from their size, the Pachu would have the advantage. The smaller the ship, the harder it is to actually strike. And they would be able to use their own bioelectricity, their own weapons to their extreme advantage. But before they realized what was going on, the human corvettes just drove right through their formation. Didn't stop. They were blazing away with point defenses, but they did not stop. They charged right towards the Trippy colony, and the Trippy colony only had several minutes to realize what was about to happen. As the battle raged out in space inside the Trippy colony, they tried desperately to seal off as many doors as they could. And as the corvettes came in, everyone realized that the corvettes, though large for a Pachu ship, were small enough to get in the docking bays that were completely peppering the surface of the Trippy colony. The Trippy colony, being that it was completely hollowed out like a piece of Swiss cheese, made it so that the humans could actually land. And they did. Coming in on landing struts, they were sliding to a stop as they fired all sorts of weapons down the corridor. Machine guns fired down, tearing everything apart as missile pods and rocket pods echoed through, breaking down doors and anyone else behind them, turning them into nothing more than pink paste on the walls. Then the doors opened and humanity came out. Everyone rolled out the back, all in their armor, firing at anything that might be in front of them. And many found out really quick that the corvettes had done their job as dropships. They had gone in and cleared the area, and now they ran down the hallway and they wanted to take this colony. But to do so, they had to get to the center of this planetoid, and they did. They charged in as fast as they could, taking out anything that got in their way. Any automated system that seemed to bounce off their armor, they still would either shoot it or just strike it on the way by with that giant, massive metal paw that was wrapped around the human's hand. They charged through, cutting through any barrier they found, tearing apart any of the Pachu, and eventually they found that the Pachu were pulling back. Why were they pulling back? Were they trying to hold the defense line? Perhaps, but that meant it was going to get very, very interesting. Outside the colony, the fight got very interesting. Reason being is that the drift was not something humans were ready to fight for. The drift itself was a strange anomaly in that sector. It was beautiful to look at, as though space itself had cracked open and allowed all these different colors of plasma to come through. It would have been a beautiful sight if it wasn't for the fact that the drift itself, it used as a type of catapult to launch ships out, but it also had a secondary effect. It was able to be locked on to pull ships in faster, which meant that the Pachu could bring in even more reinforcements much, much faster, and now they fought over the drift. Humanity's forces began to push towards the Trippy colony and began to envelop it, wrapping it on all sides, fighting their way around, trying to make sure that as they crested the horizon of the colony itself, they themselves didn't get blasted. They kept pushing and pushing and pushing, even though taking massive casualties in the process. They continued to use their larger weapons to take down the Pachu ships as they got close. Eventually, they finally got closer and closer towards the drift. They needed to secure it. Inside the Trippy colony, the humans continued. They got almost all the way to the center, and as they did, they suddenly realized what had happened. It was a trap. All around them, the Pachu came out of ducts, doorways, hatches. It didn't matter if they had to actually blast their way in. They all started coming in, grabbing themselves on the walls, the ceiling. It didn't matter. They were coming in as fast as they could. They wanted to get close, and every single human started yelling the same command, back to back, immediately forming a circle and firing in every single direction. The Pachu would get close, jumping on them, biting, scratching, reaching for any flexible piece, and began scratching and tearing and zapping as much as they could, trying to get through. Eventually, they realized that yes, certain points of the armor were flexible, which meant they were thinner, which meant they could get through. And once they could actually get through, they used their bioelectricity to zap the living shit out of whoever was inside. And because they were inside the suit itself would actually short circuit and they would fall over. This meant there was no emergency systems, no way that they could actually restart the heart, because every time the Pachu hit, it was enough to tear at the heart and sometimes even fricassee the brain. This meant the casualties were once again piling up. But every time they got one, humans would knock down dozens, sometimes hundreds. They would be lining up, firing, and would not stop. This waves and waves of Pachu came in, and they died in waves. In one area, humans were lucky enough to set up the automated sentry guns that were blasting them away as the Pachu were literally wall to wall, floor to ceiling. It didn't matter. Every single one firing until they were out of ammunition. As the humans started running out of ammo, they switched over to shorter range weapons. And this is where the Pachu realized that they might have truly crossed a line and pissed off a species they really shouldn't have. Humans had many other weapons. Not only did they have some sort of launcher for explosives, not only did they have the weapons they held that fired their projectile metal, they also had blades that came out of their arms, shields, automated systems that would zap anybody on top, even though that would not do anything to the Pachu except give them a little bit of the tingles and pause them for just a little minute. But just that 1 second was just enough for that giant metal hand to reach up, grab them by a limb, and then feel the pain as that limb was ripped off. Then, of course, the humans show how much they love fire. The words fire at will became a whole new meaning as the hallways became incinerators. From each arm, sometimes 2, 4, 6, sometimes several dozen humans would line up and blast their flamethrowers down and send that burning plasma right into the Pachu. As strong as the Pachu are and how violent they can be, no one's violent enough to get through the fact that they can't breathe and their nerve endings are now cinders. Many of them died screaming in the hallways as they slowly stopped moving. Those inside started to bring the casualties towards the exterior hatches where the corvettes were still stationed. They brought them in for medical treatment, but those that could continue just kept pushing. Eventually, they got to the center of the planet. The center of this planetoid was right where all the command and control was. Humans thought they'd be nice. They realized that the doors were locked and they would need specialized equipment to actually get through, as their torches were completely empty at this point and they couldn't exactly shoot through because, well, the doors were just too damn thick. So they simply knocked. They knocked and they waited. They waited for a response. Eventually, the word came out as the Pachu screamed into their own PA system, "You will not be able to face our warriors in here. They will tear you to pieces the moment you start coming through. We are strong. We will destroy you," and yada, yada, yada. They kept going on. And then the humans just kind of looked at each other. And one of them simply kept knocking and said, "Warriors, come out to play." This annoyed the Pachu as they realized that this was an extreme taunt, believing that their own warriors were not actually fighting, but actually playing. This was enough to make them want to open the doors to face off the humans, but they were not that stupid. They realized that if they lost the command center, they have officially lost the entire colony. And humanity didn't want to blow the command center. If they actually blew up the command center, the entire colony would destabilize and rip itself to pieces, killing everyone, including the humans inside. And nobody wanted to lose this planetoid. Even if they lost it temporarily, they could possibly get it back. The Pachu did not want to lose this. It was too important to them. That is when one of the human voices came through.
Can we talk?
The Pachu were confused. Talk about what? That is when the human voice simply set terms. They said if everyone surrenders, they'd be able to take the last of the ships and disembark. They would be given the right of free passage, something that no one ever fights. This is extremely important. They would be able to go home to their families. Though they might be in shame, they would still be alive. This was met with a long, long silence. Yet every human there who sat and waited realized that this was most likely going to go through. If bureaucrats and nobility and all these other super rich douchebags have one thing that's common, it's the fact that they care about themselves over everything else. The narcissism is strong with these ones, and it cannot be underestimated. And it proved to be effective. The simple hospitality came through. The Pachu demanded to know that the humans would not blast them, would not cook them, would not just blow them to pieces if they did in fact surrender. The word was given. And with that, every human in that area, everyone who was going to be in the tunnel as the Pachu went to their own ship was told to leave. The Pachu actually watched on their monitors as sure enough the humans left. They left. They even closed the doors behind them as they left the area. It was odd. The Pachu slowly made their way out. Many of them sitting there, sparking with energy, getting ready to strike out at anything they might see. But as they got closer and closer to the bay where one of the few remaining Pachu ships was, they saw nothing. No humans advanced. No humans were there. They got to the bay, and sure enough, it was one of their own frigates, large enough for not only the staff, but everybody with them. They piled on as fast as they could. They checked the ship to make sure it wasn't booby-trapped, and they got ready to leave. As the ship raised and rotated so it can leave, the Pachu got onto the communications again. They asked if they would be shot as soon as they left. Once again, they heard,
No, you have been given the right of free passage. Everyone out here will stand down and allow you to leave. You have our word.
With that, shakingly, the Pachu pilot accelerated out, trying to make sure he got maximum speed as he turned and headed straight towards the drift. He wanted to get out as fast as possible. As they left, they saw multiple ships, Pachu and human, in pieces all around them. Many of the human ships already attached to their own ships, trying to salvage or to rescue. They were amazed at this. How efficient are these damn killers, they thought to themselves. And they looked over towards the drift, and sure enough, not only were the ships not in their way, but they could see a human battleship deliberately moving away from their course, making sure that their main weapons were pointed away from the Pachu ship. Before they got to the drift, the commander of the Trippy colony, well, former commander, got on the radio and once again asked, "Why would you do this?" That same human voice came over.
It's a matter of hospitality. Besides, there's no reason we can't be civil. Is there?
Hearing this, everybody in the Pachu ship turned towards their commander. Realizing he couldn't show weakness, he simply said, "I shall return," before entering the drift and taking off. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on part 7 of this ongoing series. And before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Douglas Scarborough. And I also need to send out some very special thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and they are Prozac and Pancakes, Steve Uig, Erica Gem, SS Demon, Guardian Sage, MTF Guard, Brian Kemp, Douglas Scarborough, and Joseph Blosh. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax.
Ejecting!